guys, Frightener22 here, and welcome back to day 24 of my 31 Frightening Days of Halloween Marathon. After the Friday night's review of The Return of the Living Dead, I figured what the hell, let's keep the fun of the weekend going. So tonight we're going to take a look at 1987's classic, The Monster Squad. Now this is actually one of my favorite children's horror-themed films of all time, and it's easy to understand why. This film was co-written and directed by Fred Dekker, who many of you guys would probably associate with his other 1986 cult classic, Night of the Creeps, as well as his sequel to the RoboCop franchise, RoboCop 3. This film is just so incredible. I mean, this is obviously, to me, one of the best children's-orientated horror-themed films around. I mean, I really don't think that you could possibly get much better than The Monster Squad. Now, this film tells the story of a group of 12-year-olds who form a club that's surrounded about monsters, their love for the monsters. They hang out in a treehouse, discuss, the aspects of monsters and just pretty much how kick-ass they are. So it isn't until they're surprised that real monsters actually begin turning up, and they're in search of this powerful amulet that will grant them, the powers to rule the world once and for all. So it's up to this, this tight-knit group of 12-year-olds to actually put an end to the monsters from taking over the entire world. Now, like I said, this is just such a classic film in my eyes. And interestingly enough, I can understand, there's just been so much frustration and anger from so many fans that loved this film, ever since it came out way back in 1987, but at the time of its release, this film actually didn't do that great box office, so it really just kind of slowly slid in and just kind of slid away into obscurity. So it isn't until practically 20 years later that, still no DVD release in sight, that out of the, cold blue, work began on actually putting this classic gem out on DVD for the first time. So I had never actually heard about the Monster Squad until a few years ago. So I mean, I can only imagine what fans of this, of like 20-year plus fans that had been, hoping and begging for this, film to get a really legitimate release, let alone a special edition. But lo and behold, just a few short years ago, this film was actually, granted a 20th anniversary special edition. Hands down, probably one of the best, special edition DVD treatments for, a cult classic film that I've ever seen. So upon first day that it got out, I just heard so much buzz about this, so I completely did a blind buy on it, and I couldn't have been happier that I did it, because this easily went down as, not only one of my greatest blind buys I ever did, but it just immediately shot up into, my top 10, favorite cult classic children's themed horror films. And rightfully so, because the plot is it's just really fun. I mean, when people ask me about it, when, they ask me about movies and we get on the topic specifically of children's films dealing with, horror bent or what have you, I always immediately think, well, have you ever seen The Monster Squad? And most people, still this day, I mean, even with the great DVD release, many, your general people are still scratching their heads and are like, The Monster Squad? What's that? Easily, I just want to smack them over the head with, like, a shovel and be like, what, you've never heard of the Monster Squad? So when I go about explaining people, in nutshell terms, I pretty much, describe it to people as basically the Goonies with the Universal monsters. I think that's probably the best, easiest way to really intrigue people into seeing this film without giving really too much away. And, the Goonies reference really comes in. It's a really easy thing to really target, because it really does follow that, same basic theme of a group of, tight-knit friends that, have this social club that they've put together, and they, talk about adventurous things, so you can easily see the Goonies reference in that. And of course, the monsters in this film that are taking over are basically just variations of the Universal monsters, because interestingly enough, Fred Dekker, the co-writer and director of this film, actually when he was originally trying to pitch this project, he initially went to Universal Studios, where many of you may recall are responsible for all the classic Universal monsters, such as Dracula, the Wolfman, Creature from the Black Lagoon, Frankenstein, etc. So he originally went to them to do the project, but interestingly enough, Universal just simply wasn't interested in doing it. So Fred Dekker, went ahead and did it with another company, but of course they couldn't use the actual likenesses of the Universal monsters, so they had to make, slight variations to their interpretations of those classic monsters. They didn't really stray too far away from, the look of them. And, when I watch the film again, it's just kind of like, well, they certainly are different. They're not, what we had come to know in the original Universal monster films, but I mean, it's just kind of funny that, like, Universal didn't raise their eyebrows then and just didn't say, that's a little too close, guys. But I mean, truthfully, all, as I've said, these are just variations of the Universal monsters, including Dracula, Frankenstein's monster, the Mummy, Gillman from The Creature from the Black Lagoon, and the Wolfman. And all of them look really, really stunning, particularly the Wolfman design, and Gillman, to me. I mean, for some reason, I just always really dug how Gillman looked in this. He just had, a lot more fangs, a lot more gilly type things, really cool muscular structure, just really solid stuff. And the Wolfman design particularly looked really good. Interestingly enough, the Wolfman design was actually modeled after the special effects artist, the late Stan Winston. So that's a little fun fact for you guys in case you hadn't known that. But as I had said, all the makeup designs look really solid. The Mummy looks really cool. Really dirty, scrangly teeth. Really, of course, the classic dirty bandages and whatnot. And of course, Dracula. The actor Duncan Rager, who plays him, just looks really, really phenomenal and plays Dracula really well. Another interesting note is that in 2006, Wizard Magazine actually conducted a top 100 best villains of all time, and Duncan Rager's interpretation of Dracula from the Monster Squad actually landed him a number 30 spot as one of the best horror villains of all time, which is interesting. I mean, he's a really solid Dracula, and that just really goes to show the credit and to what he did in this movie. I mean, he beat out such people as Bela Lugosi's Dracula and Christopher Lee's Dracula to land him on this list. So it's really, really incredible. I really like Duncan Rager's interpretation of the character Dracula. Now, as I had said, with more fun facts to throw out there, Fred Dekker, when he initially was submitting his cut of the film, the studios actually told him there's actually like 12 or 13 minutes cut out of the film because the studio executives didn't want this film to run over 90 minutes, so that explains the 82 minute runtime on this film. But nevertheless, it's 82 minutes of just pure, non-stop fun that could not disappoint any horror fan. Truly, I sincerely believe that. Now, in this film, it's just really, really, solid. It really follows that great children's, spirit, but has a really, really great horror bent to it that just, not many films can really capture it like the Monster Squad did. If anybody is, a striving director or that wants to work in the film industry and wants to particularly work in, children's films with horror bent, look no further than the Monster Squad to use as your, fucking encyclopedia to that genre. Because this film, in my opinion, is perfect in the genre. It's a perfect film and, wonderful, gem in that, small subgenre. At a local convention, horror movie convention that I had attended in August, Fred Dekker was actually there screening, the upcoming DVD release of his other cult classic film, Night of the Creeps. And if you guys ever get the time to see Fred Dekker at a convention or listen in on a Q&A, I would highly take advantage of that because Fred Dekker is an incredibly gracious man and incredibly charismatic. I mean, this guy just talks and is just so engaging in his words. He's funny, he's witty, and he just has so many incredible things to talk about on his career now, as well as, the behind-the-scenes stories and just everything that went through on this film. Just a really, really solid guy, so if you guys ever get the opportunity to, talk to him or listen to him, absolutely take advantage of it. So if you guys have never seen this film, get on that. I mean, out of all the films that I'm going to review and recommend this whole month, I can't stress to see the Monster Squad enough. And as I said, the 20th anniversary DVD is out on shelves now, but if you guys, are looking for something better, look no further than November as the Blu-ray release of the Monster Squad is released. So definitely do not hesitate this Halloween season and check out the Monster Squad. As always, guys, thanks again for tuning into my marathon, and I'll see you again tomorrow for yet another review. This is Frightener22.